It's time to put together a bunch of little ideas that I don't think can sustain a full video right now, but I really want to express and get feedback on. This is 3 urbanism/transit hot takes. Hot take number 1. I don't like congestion charges. That isn't to say that they can never be useful or effective at certain things, but I am sceptical of the idea that congestion charge is a blanket solution to discouraging car travel in cities. First, I think the long-term effectiveness of these schemes are in doubt. Congestion charges are a new idea and not very widespread. A few cities over around 20 to 30 years really isn't enough to judge how future-proof they are, and I think the experience in London bears that out. While London's congestion charge saw a dramatic drop in car travel early on, it's basically come back by now, just with the type of traffic being changed as the scheme's exceptions for commercial vehicles and taxis fill the void. Maybe some people will argue that's a good thing, where private vehicles have been replaced with more economically productive types of car travel. But to be the solution to downtown traffic congestion, the congestion charge clearly is not. Second, I feel that congestion charges are kinda doing a victory lap for the heavy lifting of other policies. Congestion charges generally only affect the very centre of a city, so they're not cutting traffic in places that are maybe further behind on the walkability front and could do with a boost. But also, from London to Milan to Stockholm, the congestion zone is being supported by vast high-capacity public transportation networks that stretch far beyond the area affected by the schemes. In other words, congestion charges are taking credit for the decades of infrastructure investment that have actually enabled people to go car-free in these cities. And that's an issue for places that don't have a Milan or London or Stockholm worth of transportation options. In a place like Cambridge, as well-intentioned as its proposed sustainable travel zone might be, it's starting from zero. And an all-at-once strategy is both politically and practically risky, where people are being asked to bear upfront costs to support promised improvements that are subject to the same implementation risks as everything else. Finally, I think in the big picture, cities that have really successfully tackled the issue of traffic congestion don't really claim that a congestion charge is a major part of how. They can cite highway removals, walkable urban cores, good active and public transportation. All of those are actually how we reduce the necessity of car travel in the big picture. I just think that congestion charges are divisive, dubious in their standalone effectiveness, and rely on the support of large-scale infrastructure investments to really live up to the hype. They can be a useful source of revenue when implemented correctly and equitably, but it does take a lot of work to get to that point, that I don't think its biggest advocates really disclose. Hot take 2. Suspended monorails are great, and they deserve to be treated as a proper transit mode. The Solingen monorail, that is all. But seriously, it's fair to say that monorails don't get a great rep in urban transport for being gimmicky, often proprietary, and the not-so-glowing subject of a Simpsons episode. There are good examples out there, but few are in the category of this is better than just having an elevated rail line. The suspended monorail is different in one key area. Its track is above the train rather than below it. That means that its track supports have far more flexibility in how they connect to the tracks, which results in systems with incredibly tiny ground infrastructure requirements. I will link a cab ride of the Solingen monorail in the description because it can explain this point better than I ever could. A fast, high-capacity rail connection mostly over roads, through a winding, hilly and mixed-density route. This flat-out could not have been built as an elevated railway or traditional monorail, and people should take note. The most famous example of a suspended monorail, Wuppertal, is another great example of the suspended monorail strengths, sitting over a river and roads without blocking the right-of-ways with support columns. This makes me wonder what niches for suspended monorails we're missing. Could they be a less intrusive way of building widening lines in high-density downtowns? Could they be faster than winding narrow gauge railways on some hill climbs? Obviously, suspended monorails still have their flaws, the need for elevated track and stations, and the fact that they need to always be suspended being key. But I think we should have the imagination to at least consider where, just like in Shonen, this technology can be a silver bullet solution to a unique set of environmental traits. Hot take 3. Urbanists need to embrace their conservative populist sides more. So my lightbulb moment for this comes from a surprising place, the 2022 Kansas abortion referendum. For context, in 2019, the Kansas Supreme Court ruled that the state's constitution's protections on personal rights applied to the right of abortion access. In 2022, a constitutional amendment went to the ballot that would remove that right. The timing of this vote came just 6 weeks after Roe v. Wade was overturned, making this a high-profile and high-stakes vote. What the pro-abortion side did to try and get their argument over in a solidly conservative state provides a fascinating, useful case study that everybody can learn from. Your average political ad from Kansans for Constitutional Freedom sounded like this.
This confusing constitutional amendment is a slippery slope for Kansas. It gives government more power over your privacy and your personal medical decisions. Don't let politicians take away your freedom.
One ad assured voters that abortion was already highly regulated.
Here are the facts. Taxpayer funding for abortion outlawed. Abortion after viability banned. Parental consent required.
They got a pastor to deliver this message.
Sometimes those conversations are about abortion. As Christians, we are instructed to love one another. We do so when we respect and trust women as God does. I'm voting no on the proposed amendment because it replaces religious freedom with government control.
A doctor had this to say.
But now, the government wants to force doctors in Kansas to break that oath by passing a constitutional amendment that could put a mother's life at risk. It's a government mandate that could ban all abortions with no exceptions, even rape and incest. It's dangerous, and it ties the hands of doctors in Kansas.
Kansans for Constitutional Freedom did have more traditional pro-abortion messages featuring personal stories from women. But it is striking at how unprogressive their campaign was as a whole. Note the buzzwords: religious freedom, taxpayer, government mandate, government control. Don't let politicians take away your freedom. Even just the name of the Vote No organisation, Kansans for Constitutional Freedom. This is a very American libertarian and even paternal case for preserving abortion access, and one that isn't particularly concerned about law of common left-wing views on marginalised communities, bodily autonomy and patriarchy. I'm sure there was plenty of hands-wringing about that fact among activists, but the fact is that the voters in this referendum are Kansans, not abortion activists. And it worked. The amendment failed by a comfortable margin statewide on a healthy turnout. All 4 congressional districts rejected the amendment, making it clear that the vote was won across traditional partisan lines. Most importantly, Kansas is able to continue operating as a safe haven for abortion access for millions of people, not just in Kansas, but in many surrounding states as well. The lesson here is that the best argument for certain policy in public debates and campaigns often aren't the same arguments that devoted activists make among themselves. And it is very important to get out of that bubble and consider how you can win people who you may not agree with. For example, can we make a no big government mandate argument for why local towns and cities should have the power to implement bike lanes? Can transit-oriented development be framed as a way of encouraging private enterprise and saving the taxpayer? Urbanism is more popular than ever, but so is its opposition. It would be a huge mistake to think that absolutist ideas of banning cars and building dense can get over anywhere, and anyone with any sort of objection just doesn't understand. That doesn't mean traditional arguments in favour of good urbanism don't work, but context matters. I think people in this space need to embrace arguments that they aren't necessarily comfortable with making. That may mean putting aside the campaigns built around climate or hard restrictions on car use in favour of addressing housing, the powers of local government, and personal choice on travel. At the end of the day, the argument doesn't matter as long as the thing you want gets built. A bike lane is a bike lane, regardless of whether you built it to save the environment or because it's cheaper for the taxpayer than a car lane. Those are my urbanism hot takes. Please do tell me what you think, whether you disagree or you agree. Thanks for watching.